SG-1000, 1983. The very first Sega console was the SG-1000, released in Japan on July 15, 1983. What's interesting is that it launched on the exact same day as Nintendo's Famicom, which later became the NES worldwide. While Sega had been successful in arcades with hits like Zaxxon and Hang On, the home market was new territory for them. The SG-1000 was technically functional but limited. Its graphics looked more like older ColecoVision or Atari 2600 games than the advanced visuals people were about to see on the Famicom. Its controllers were stiff joysticks, and the library was extremely small, consisting mostly of downgraded arcade ports or clones of popular titles. Even though it managed to sell around 160,000 units in its first year, it was obvious Sega had been beaten right out of the gate. Nintendo's Famicom had more power, better developer relationships, and an expanding library. The SG-1000 faded quickly from the spotlight, but it gave Sega a valuable lesson. Hardware design, strong software, and developer support all mattered. In many ways, the SG-1000 is less remembered as a successful product and more as Sega's first experiment, proof that they were ready to try competing with Nintendo, even if they weren't fully prepared yet. Sega Master System, 1985-1986, Sega tried again with the Sega Mark III, which was renamed the Master System for international markets. It launched in Japan in 1985, then came to North America and Europe in 1986. This time, Sega had built a system that was clearly superior to Nintendo's NES on paper. It boasted better colors, sharper graphics, and even accessories like 3D glasses that worked with certain games. Sega also had its own mascot at the time, Alex Kidd, who starred in Alex Kidd in Miracle World, designed to compete with Mario. The Master System struggled in North America, though, because of Nintendo's infamous third-party exclusivity contracts. Developers who made games for the NES couldn't make them for Sega's system, leaving the Master System with a much smaller game library. As a result, Nintendo dominated the US market while Sega only captured a tiny share. However, the story was very different overseas. In Europe, particularly the UK and France, the Master System found massive success. It was also a phenomenon in Brazil, where the system was manufactured under license by Tectoy and remained on sale for decades. In fact, Master System consoles and games were still being sold there into the 2000s. While it never beat Nintendo in the US, the Master System established Sega as a serious competitor worldwide. It proved they could build hardware that matched or even surpassed Nintendo's, even if their business strategy and game library still held them back in certain regions. Sega Genesis Mega Drive, 1988-1989. Sega's breakthrough came with the Mega Drive, known as the Genesis in North America. It launched in Japan in 1988 and arrived in the US in 1989. This was Sega's first true global success. The Genesis offered 16-bit graphics, arcade-quality sound, and a faster CPU that gave it a slick, action-packed feel. It was marketed directly at teenagers and young adults, a demographic Nintendo wasn't targeting as aggressively. Sega's bold slogan, "Genesis does what Nintendo don't," captured the rebellious, cooler image the company wanted. The killer app came in 1991 when Sega introduced Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic wasn't just a fun game. He became Sega's official mascot and a cultural icon. His speed and edgy design embodied everything Sega wanted to represent. Faster, cooler, and more modern than Nintendo. Combined with hits like Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, and sports games like Madden NFL, the Genesis built a strong library. By 1992, Sega had captured almost half the US console market, something no company had ever done against Nintendo up to that point. The Genesis also had another advantage: Mortal Kombat. Unlike Nintendo's censored version, Sega's release included blood and fatalities, reinforcing its image as the console for mature players. While Nintendo eventually caught up with the SNES, for a few years, Sega was legitimately leading the industry in the West. This was the peak of Sega's console dominance. Sega CD, 1991-1992. After the Genesis' success, Sega looked to expand its lifespan by introducing add-ons. The Sega CD, launched in Japan in 1991 and in North America in 1992, was one of these. The concept was exciting. CD-ROMs could hold much more storage than cartridges, enabling full-motion video, CD-quality music, and larger game worlds. Sega marketed it as the future of gaming. However, reality didn't quite live up to the promise. While some titles like Lunar, Eternal Blue, and Sonic CD showed off the hardware's potential, most of the Sega CD's library was filled with poorly made FMV full-motion video games like Night Trap and Sewer Shark. These games looked impressive in screenshots but offered shallow, repetitive gameplay. On top of that, the Sega CD was expensive. At $300, not including the Genesis required to use it, many players simply couldn't justify the price. It sold just over 2 million units worldwide, a small fraction compared to the Genesis. The Sega CD is remembered as an ambitious idea that arrived before the technology and developer support were truly ready. It didn't ruin Sega yet, but it planted the seeds of a reputation for confusing add-ons and overcomplication. Sega 32X, 1994. By 1994, the gaming industry was transitioning to 32-bit systems. Instead of focusing on its upcoming Saturn, Sega rushed out the 32X, a cartridge-based add-on for the Genesis. Released in late 1994, it was marketed as an affordable way to jump into 32-bit gaming without buying a brand new console. The timing couldn't have been worse. Just months after the 32X launched, Sega's own Saturn was released in Japan, with a US launch scheduled shortly after. Consumers were left confused. Should they buy the 32X or wait for the Saturn? Developers were equally hesitant. Very few supported the 32X because they knew it was a short-term system. The result was disastrous. The 32X received fewer than 40 games, many of which were rushed or unimpressive. Sales were abysmal, and the system was discontinued within 2 years. Today, the 32X is often considered one of Sega's biggest mistakes. It damaged consumer trust and painted Sega as a company that didn't have a clear vision, something that would haunt them in the years to come. Sega Saturn, 1994-1995. The Sega Saturn launched in Japan in 1994 and in the US in 1995. Sega hoped it would compete against Sony's PlayStation and Nintendo's N64. On paper, the Saturn had a lot going for it. It was powerful for 2D games and ran arcade hits like Virtua Fighter 2 and Daytona USA almost perfectly. In Japan, it found decent success thanks to a strong lineup of fighting games and RPGs. But the US launch was a mess. Sega surprised retailers and developers by launching the Saturn early in May 1995, months before the planned date. Many stores weren't prepared, and some, like Toys R Us, were left out entirely. Developers were angry too, since they didn't have enough time to finish games for launch. On top of that, the Saturn's architecture was notoriously complicated, making it very difficult to develop 3D games compared to Sony's PlayStation. The PlayStation ended up being cheaper, easier to develop for, and better suited for the growing 3D gaming trend. The Saturn sold around 9 million units worldwide, but it was completely crushed by the PlayStation's 100 million. In North America, the Saturn became a punchline, marking the beginning of Sega's decline as a hardware maker. Sega Dreamcast, 1998-1999. The Dreamcast was Sega's final console, and it remains one of the most beloved systems ever made. Launched in Japan in 1998 and worldwide in 1999, it was years ahead of its time. It came with a built-in modem for online play, something unheard of back then. The unique VMU memory card doubled as a small handheld screen. Its controller was unusual but functional, and its launch lineup was phenomenal. Sonic Adventure, Soul Calibur, Crazy Taxi, and later, classics like Shenmue and Jet Set Radio. The Dreamcast was initially a hit. It sold over 500,000 units in the US within its first 2 weeks, breaking records at the time. Gamers praised its innovation, graphics, and library. But then came Sony's announcement of the PlayStation 2. Not only was the PS2 more powerful, it also doubled as a DVD player, giving it broader appeal. Third-party developers quickly jumped ship to Sony's platform, leaving Sega without strong long-term support. By 2001, Sega officially discontinued the Dreamcast after selling around 9 million units worldwide. This ended Sega's run as a console maker, but the Dreamcast left a huge legacy. Its online features, creative library, and risk-taking spirit have made it a cult classic. Many fans still argue it was simply too far ahead of its time.